Good evening, church family. Hope you're doing well this evening. Today we're going to get into prayer number 2, and this is the prayer of Jacob. Jacob stole Esau's birthright, and of course Esau had not forgotten that, and it ended up Jacob having to go on the run, and it appeared that Jacob was going to have a problem. And one night he began to wrestle with this man in the dark, and he wrestled all night. And when Jacob had taken hold of his opponent, he said, "I will not let go until you bless me." And in Genesis chapter 32, verses 27 through 28, it says, the man asked him, "What is your name?" "Jacob," he answered. Then the man said, "Your name will no longer be Jacob, but Israel, because you have struggled with God and with men and had overcome." Jumping down to verse 29, Jacob said, "Please tell me your name." But he replied, "Why do you ask my name?" Then he blessed him there. So Jacob called the place Peniel, saying, "It is because I saw God face to face, and yet my life was spared." The sun rose above him as he passed Peniel, and he was limp because of his hip. Therefore, to this day, the Israelites do not eat the tendon attached to the socket of the hip, because the socket of Jacob's hip was touched near the tendon. This is one of those accounts that you read, you're like, wow, he wrestled with God. That's pretty amazing, to wrestle with God. And the question is, or we have to ask ourselves, when we wrestle with God, what is the outcome? Are we wrestling with God because we're stubborn, set in our ways? Or are we trying to seek blessing from God? Genesis 33, verses 1 through 3. And so this goes on through the account, and it says in verse 33, first 3 verses, Jacob looked up, and there was Esau coming with his 400 men. So there's 400 men coming. Jacob was terrified. So he divided the children among Leah, Rachel, and the 2 maidservants. He put the maidservants and their children in front, Leah and her children next, Rachel and Joseph in the rear. He himself went on ahead and bowed to the ground 7 times as he approached his brother. See, God had given Jacob a plan, one that would require something new for Jacob: humility. Something we have to ask ourselves. Do we seek humility in our lives? When Jacob went and faced his brother, he bowed low before him 7 times, as an inferior would before a highly honored patron. Verse 4 in chapter 33, but Esau ran to meet Jacob and embraced him. He threw his arms around his neck and kissed him, and they wept. So you see, instead of killing his brother, there was reconciliation there. Yet one of the biggest changes seen in the life of Jacob was not only his name, but he got a new heart. And in verse 8 it says, "What do you mean by all this company I have met?" And he said, "To find favor in the sight of my Lord." But Esau said, "I have plenty, my brother. Let what you have be your own." Jacob said, "No, please, if I have found favor in your sight, then take my present from my hand. For I see your face as one sees the face of God, and you have received me favorably. Please take my gift, which has been brought to you, because God has dealt graciously with me, and because I have plenty." Thus he urged him, and he took it. Can you imagine Jacob begging Esau, "Please take my blessing"? Jacob, is the one who previously stole Esau's blessing, was now eager to give a blessing because he was a new man. When you encounter God, you are not the same person. You come out differently. He humbly acknowledged that God had blessed him. Therefore, he desired to bless others. Are we a blessing to others? So making it personal. And there's 5 points here that we need to go through. The first point is God blesses the spiritually aggressive. We have to be bold in our prayers, not timid, not lackadaisical, not, well, maybe I'll ask God and maybe he'll answer, maybe he won't. No, we have to come with God in boldness in faith. You know, Jesus talks about the seed, the faith of a mustard seed. Point 2, God is willing and able to bless those who ask him. So that's something we have to remember, that God is willing and able to bless those who ask. Number 3, God's blessing is big enough to go beyond us to others. Jacob asked God to bless him, but he was not the only one blessed. His family, his brother, and ultimately through the Messiah, all of us are blessed through the line of Jacob. Number 4, receiving God's blessing should make us bless others. You see, when we're recipients of God's blessings to us, we need to be so grateful that we want to bless others. We want to go out there and share that. We don't want to keep it for ourselves. Too many times people do that nowadays. You know, when we share the gospel message, God doesn't expect us to keep the gospel to ourselves. You know, the gospel's for everyone. It's not for a select group or a select culture, a nation. The gospel is for all. And we have to be willing to step out in faith and share. That's why we, as I talk about so much on Sundays, growing in your personal study, knowing the Word of God, so that you can share the gospel message. And also when called upon to defend the faith, 1 Peter 3:15. And finally, number 5, God reveals himself to those who really want to know him. You know, God tells us that if we seek after him, we will find him. You look through the scriptures and the text, and you see those who were really seeking God. They absolutely found him. They found God. Seek and you will find. Knock and the door will be opened unto you. We have to seek God with everything that we have, because Christ is the one that we find our joy and our fulfillment in, that gets us through life. You know, Christ is the perfect man. None of us is perfect. Go back to Adam and Eve. The first 2 human beings were created in the image. You know, we're all created in the image of God, but the first two human beings created in the image of God, absolutely perfect, in perfect fellowship and harmony. And unfortunately, they fell. And because we all come through Adam and Eve, we're all descendants of them. We have that sin nature. And so, before we come to Christ, we're at war with Christ. We're at odds with him. And so when we find Christ, when we seek him, when we find him, he is there. We have to be willing to seek Christ. If we seek, we will find. If we knock, the door will be opened. Christ is there waiting. All we have to do is seek and find him. And here's one final thought on Jacob's prayer. There are no miracles without messes, and no need for blessing if we have it already. Remember, all of us are blessed. If you know Jesus Christ, if you have asked him into your heart, if you are a follower of Christ, if you are imitating Christ, and you are serving him and doing his will in your life, and serving where he's called you to serve, and you're following Christ, imitating him, you are richly blessed. We are richly blessed. Seek Christ and you will find him, and share him with others. Well, that concludes day 2. Tomorrow we'll get into day 3, and that's the third prayer, and it's entitled, Go With Us. It's the prayer of Moses out of Exodus 33. 3.